Hello, hello. Good day, everyone. How are you doing? Third day of ChangeNOW. Who's feeling great? Raise your hand if you're feeling great. Yeah, I saw some people raising their hand, really being enthusiastic, and other people did it out of social desirability. My neighbor is raising his or her hand, so I will also raise my hand. But no panic, that's why you're here for today, because we're gonna talk about your mental health, because mental health, it matters. So a very warm welcome to this session. My name is Sandy Snoeck. I will be guiding you through this session, because let's be honest, we have to stay with ourselves until death do us part. So we better get along well with ourselves until we're dead, so in a good mental state. And we'll look at our mental health from different perspectives. We have an amazing keynote from Dawod. She's from Peace Therapist. Then we will welcome UN Secretary General of Youth Affairs, Felipe Paullier, and researcher Julianne Holt-Lunstad for a panel discussion. And to finish, on top of all those amazing people, I'll have a chat with Tori, Tsui, who's the author of It's Not Just You. Are you excited about that? Yeah, your mental health is amazing. So I will introduce Dawod. Dawod, she received an award of the UN. She had to flee Syria during the civil war, and then she really was missing some mental health support. But instead of being sad about it, she just, it became her strength, and she created a platform with mental health support for all the people who, just like her had to flee for war or are suffering mental health problems. She's probably too modest to say it herself, so I will do it. She is an award winner, and she founded the Peace Therapist. So give a big round of applause for Dawod.
Hello, everyone. It's an honor to be here at ChangeNOW, because I believe all the people here are like me, believe that change are something is it something that we are waiting for? It is something that we believe in. We build it by ourselves. We work for it. It's our stories that make change. We do change by our hands and with our hearts. I'm here today to tell you about my story of change, but I think I'm not able to change the slides. Okay, it was changing so speed. Okay, my name is Dawod. I'm the founder of Peace Therapist and mental health advocate. Peace Therapist is what I will tell you today, how I thought about it and how does it all started. I will start with my story. I'm a Syrian refugee, and this is my life before war. My childhood were filled by peace and joy, happiness, family time, and it was filled with relatives and neighbors. I can say everything was guaranteed and looking so happily peaceful. But suddenly, in the middle of nowhere, war came. War came to Raqqa city. It is the city where war started in Syria. And we didn't know how serious the situation is until it came to our own door. A flight came, and it bombed just right beside of our home. Our home, the building, was in a so strategic place. because it was beside of the governmental hospital, many governmental institutions, so it was constantly targeted, unfortunately. The home being targeted made later flights target our home because these groups who were managing the city were gathering there all the time. This flight came and bombed our building. Like, we were lucky that it was a bit windy and the bomb was a bit like changing its location, so we survived, but a wall of my own room was disposed to the street. I was only 14 years old, and unfortunately, I experienced horrible time, unimaginable horror. I was able to see severed bodies and cotton heads from my own window, which later made me experience something was not expected also. I suffered from psychological problems, and this is like, here you can find some photographs of me with my family the moment when we crossed the borders between Mayans, by the help of the smuggler, giving him everything we own at that moment because we get out of the home by our pajamas to be able to get to a safe place. The moment we crossed the borders, someone called my father. It was our neighbor, and he told our building was destroyed, totally destroyed. This time, I was in really mixed feelings. Should I be happy that we survived? Should I be worried that I have my big brother still in Syria in a different city? What happened to our neighbors? What will happen with our relatives? I was so in mixed feelings. The moment I thought the war has ended for me, I find out about the second kind of war. This moment I started to have psychological problems, and I could not able to get out of the home for a total 1 year. I was lucky to have my family beside of me. They supported me so much. So later I started to continue my education. I was studying computer engineering, and one day I had this idea because I could have seen a lot of refugees were still suffering from mental health problems. I thought, why there is no solution for this? Maybe I can do something for them. I was studying computer engineering, and I wanted to build something so accessible, reachable for everyone in the mother language, in culturally sensitive, what I was not able to reach, I wanted to do it for them and for all of us. So I started to build Peace Therapist. Peace Therapist is a platform where we are providing mental health services in English, Turkish, Kurdish, and Arabic languages. And in the future, we are planning to give it in even more languages. I was a student, I was a woman, I was young. I was a student when I founded Peace Therapist. And I was a girl in a male-dominated field, engineering, in Şanlıurfa city, which is considered Middle East, and trying to build awareness about something which is a subject we all are still trying to avoid, mental health. One another hardship is that I wanted to do this not for profit. I wanted to do it for free for refugees and for everyone who needs these services, for disadvantaged groups, for women, for violent women. That's where I started to have the mission of Peace Therapist. The moment I had the idea of it, I said, okay, I know what I want to do in my life. It's just the passion of my life and the only goal that I want to work on. The name Peace Therapist means everything. With Peace Therapist, we want to build inner peace and also contribute in building peace in the world. We support anyone who needs psychological support, but we do have special efforts for refugees, earthquake survivors, and displaced individuals, and increasingly people who are affected by climate change. We work in 3 different models. We work with individuals, with peace therapists. We integrate AI to match between psychologists and support seekers. We integrate AI to match between of them according to the expertise of the psychologist and the need of the support seeker, according to the gender preferred and according to the language and the cultural background. So it can be at the maximum quality, at the maximum beneficial and helpful for them. We also do partnership with organizations, companies, governments, and universities. Like the one, for example, we did with the International Labour Organization to support earthquake victims, and with a Spark organization to support staff mental health, so it can be more personalized according to what this organization wants, so we can personalize our services to help them. We also have our social plan. In our social plan, we are providing these services for free for refugees and disadvantaged groups, and we are making a portion of our earnings every year to be able to support this target group, which can change every year according to the situation. For this year, we are working with women who have disabled children, Syrian women, especially also violated Turkish women. We were able to support over 70,000 people across 26 countries. I'm proud to say that, and we were able to, now we are working with more than 150 psychologists from different countries, more than a lot of sessions delivered. 80% of them were trauma-related. Now we are working with 4 languages, with 26 countries, and we want to increase these numbers. And proud to say also, 98 are happy with the results. We do social cohesion programs with host communities and with refugees. So we do this for them to build empathy and for them to be able to help them. We also do this with our staff, with our psychologists at the same time. Feedbacks are the most heart-melting thing for me throughout this journey, because every feedback we receive, the heart-melting words I read, make me forget about all the struggles I experienced throughout the war, throughout the difficulties building peace therapists. So that's what's giving me more energy. I want to tell you another story that made me begin from zero, and yes, again. In February 2023, me with my family experienced earthquake. So again, at 4 a.m. morning, we ran. I thought it's a bomb, flashback to what I experienced in Syria, but it wasn't. We ran to our cars. We stayed there for weeks. From the first very moment I went to the car, I realized how much is this so devastating. So I posted on Peace Therapist social media platforms that we are providing free mental health services for people who are affected by this earthquake. But I was surprised, inside of hours, we had hundreds of requests. In days, they were even thousands. With our team of psychologists, we worked tirelessly to support these people who asked us for help. And we were happy later to be able to collaborate with International Labour Organization for 2 years to be able to give them even more long-term therapy sessions. That's why I want to tell how much collaborations are so important for us to be able to support people who are in need of us. I know this peace therapist was built for these times of crisis. So I want to call you and invite you to collaborate with us to co-create customized mental health programs for your teams and communities, so it can be personalized, especially for you also. Support our free therapy model, because there is now more than 110 million displaced people all around the world, and we need to act. I survived war, I survived the earthquake, I survived also floods, it's another story. But I also discovered purpose in the ruins. Peace Therapist is more than a platform. It's a way of me saying we can rebuild. It's not just building, but people, and not just lives, but peace. Thank you, ChangeNOW, for believing in radical hope also. Let's not just imagine a better world. Let's heal our way there together, all together. Thank you so much. It's my page. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jin. Wow.
Thank you.
That's an amazing story that you brought for us. It's so heartwarming to see that out of the ruins that you became a social entrepreneur, and it became such a wonderful story. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much
For your keynote. Wow. At ChangeNOW, we believe that art should be also part of the conversation, especially when it comes to mental health. So I'm so glad to announce Amélie Joannides from the Paris Opera for a little piece of performance. Give a warm round of applause for Amélie. Thank you so much to Amélie Joannides for this beautiful performance. Dancer with the Paris Opera, but she's also a guest artist in the Prime series Étoile. Étoile is French for star, and isn't she a true star? Thanks for sharing this moment with us. Please, yeah, you already gave her a big round of applause, but let's give another one until those people get installed. And Jin previously mentioned that taking care of ourselves and inner peace also have a positive impact on a broader society and even play roles in peace building. So let's further dive into mental health. I would like to welcome two new guests on stage, and those are Julianne Holt-Lunstad and Felipe Paullier. So please put your hands together for our following guests. Hello, hello. Please have a seat. Welcome. So nice to have you here. Felipe, you already had a very, very busy schedule today because you work for the UN. You are the Assistant Secretary General for Youth Affairs. You're the, explained simply, you're the head of the UN Youth Office. So you're not only the youngest Assistant Secretary General, but it's also a relatively new office, right? Why did the UN develop this new office?
First of all, thank you. I'm very happy.
Is
this working?
Is the sound working? Yeah.
Kind of.
Okay.
So first of all, thank you. I'm very glad to be here for this special conversation. And answering your response, the establishment of the youth office within the core of the organization, it's an institutional response to try to accelerate, the emphasis we put on youth issues, and at the same time create across the whole organization better and new mechanisms to engage with young people, which I think it's the most crucial challenge for institutions globally, not only for the UN as a platform, but for any institution across the world. So I've been here 1.5 years now, and it's been a complex with a lot of uncertainties, but very challenging and hopeful route also.
Yeah, and the youth of today, of course, are the leaders of tomorrow. So you at the UN, you take care of them, so they will feel great and they will feel in good mental health. So
I think, the way I see our role and my role and the role of the office is really about creating those spaces, because we strongly believe that when young people are inside, they will make their part, I think Jean's story, testimony, her commitment not only to advocate but to take action is one of thousands, millions of examples of young people that are taking their lead, And I think that's what we're trying to do from an institutional perspective, but it's really about how we can create those spaces for young people to make the change.
yeah, you focus on young people. Julian, you're a professor of psychology and neuroscience at Brigham Young University in the US. Could you just maybe, so you have a lot of expertise, you did a lot of research. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about the biggest challenges that we are dealing with when it comes to our mental health, that we're struggling today?
Yeah, of course, we know that there are so many challenges that exist currently. And it feels like we're not only facing a mental health crisis, but we're facing climate crisis, crises of political polarization and divisions in the world. We hear of crises around addiction and other forms. And we are also seeing what is being referred to as a loneliness crisis. And as someone whose area of expertise focuses on social connections, this is something that may be intertwined with all of these crises. And as we are more disconnected, not only does this impact our mental health directly, we know that this is predictive of development of new depression and even severity of depression. But we also know that as we are less connected, we also then have less support in order to face these crises and to get the kind of support that we need, whether that's support from friends and family, our community, and even even recognizing the supports that might exist in our communities. And so while our relationships are intricately connected to mental health directly, we also see it directly influencing our ability to cope with all the crises that are concurrently happening.
Yeah, and you already mentioned a couple of them. No, you said we have the political crisis, we have climate change. There's also digital overload, and yet on the other hand, we feel socially isolated, or a lot of people feel socially isolated. So, Felipe, do you think that young people are even more experience even more crisis?
So allow me to start, and I am a medical doctor by training, but for the last years I've been working more on policy and on the political arena. And actually my current role within the UN, it's really also a very political one, because it's really about how to make the structural changes and how we can also catalyze certain agendas that have been not on the table at the highest level for many years, And one of those, I think, is actually what we are discussing today, the mental health and the well-being of young people and adolescents, And I think when we look at the big picture about this topic, I think the first thing is that this is clearly a topic that is defining the current generation of young people, And this is a big difference with the past, For young people now, in most of countries, unfortunately, I think we still have some challenges in some countries, mental health is not anymore a taboo, It's really something we are keen and we are willing to talk much more about and to put on the table. The second, I think, and why this is a defining challenge for our generation, it's really because we are facing the highest amount of conflicts ever since the Second World War. And that definitely is having a huge impact. And Jean told us her story. And unfortunately, we have many of those young people, because young people are the most affected by any conflict, Young people, children and women are also always the most affected. But at the same time, we are facing this climate crisis, and this brings into the table eco-anxiety. We're also facing the post-pandemic challenges, and pandemic accelerated many issues in relation to depression, anxiety on young people, and we're still also facing the consequences of it. And finally, I think why this is a defining challenge for our generation, it's because we are the most hyper-connected generation ever in terms of technology, but at the same time, we are facing huge challenges of isolation, and how also this technology that could be something amazing, very positively in terms of development and impact, at the same time is having huge consequences in how our communities are organized.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're online very connected, but yet we feel often so lonely, and especially young people are most affected by it. So it's your expertise, right, Julianne? So really getting a social connection, and you did a lot of research on that. Could you tell us a little bit about what works and for whom can we take which measures to improve our social connection?
Yeah, first off, I just want to echo what you just said, because in addition to youth being some of the most affected by mental health, we also see that among global estimates on loneliness, it's youth that are most affected. And so these are concurrently happening at the same time. And so what my work has really focused on is all the kinds of consequences that occur around this issue. And we hear often mental health is health. And we see indeed that mental health is intricately connected to cognitive health and to physical health and even longevity. And so when we think about mental health, we need to also think of these other aspects of health. And so social health is a critical element of that. And so what we know is that we have absolutely robust evidence from multiple scientific disciplines across very robust scientific methodologies, that these consequences are severe, widespread, and so the key becomes then, what can we do about it? And that's really critical because, unfortunately, we're at a state where our evidence is extremely robust on the consequences, and we're lagging behind on what we can do about it. That's not to say that we don't have hope and that we don't have evidence, because we do. But we are still learning, and there are still gaps in this. But there are many things that we point out, and I'll just note, I was the lead scientific editor on the US Surgeon General's advisory, and we offer many recommendations within that. And also, as I advise various organizations and governments, we recognize that the solutions need to come at multiple levels. And so it needs to come at the policy level, but it also needs to come at the institutional level and within communities, and there is a role for each and every one of you. And so we're learning more about what specific examples can be done, but maybe if we have time, I can go into some more specifics.
One of the stakeholders you mentioned was policy level, and of course I saw you nodding, Felipe, because how, of course, the UN tries to advocate for mental health. What are the strategies you use? How do you want to improve the mental health for all these people?
No, first of all, and I couldn't agree more with Julianne. But I knew it before coming to the panel, because it's just about getting into read her bio to understand how involved and how committed she is with this specific topic, you know. So in terms of some facts, you know, I think it's very important to understand that this is a global issue, you know. I come from a country very far away from Syria, you know. And before joining the UN, I used to live, I was raised, I was born, I studied, I developed my career in my home country, which is in Latin America. It's a very small country called Uruguay, you know? And it's a very peaceful country. But we have a very deepened crisis on mental health also in the country, you know? Suicide is the third cause of death among young people between 15 and 29 years old, you know? And the numbers are not improving, you know, when we see certain tendencies in some countries. But at the same time, what we see is that only 50% of countries have certain initiatives in relation to promotion and prevention, for example, of mental health on schools, you know? And I think, as Julianne was saying, this is a challenge that demands us to see with broader lens than the traditional lens, you know. We cannot continue to look at the mental health and well-being issues with a typical and only medicalized approach, you know. This is a social issue. This is a community challenge, you know. And it's really about addressing it from its multiple layers, you know. The UN is currently already doing this in the ground, you know. I came a few weeks ago from Guatemala, and I got to know, for example, how the International Organization of Migration is working in terms of mental health support to migrants that are coming back from the US to the country. I was later in Guyana, and I got to know how IOM and WHO are supporting the national government in suicide prevention initiatives, you know. I think Jean and her project, supported by ILO, in terms of support to victims of the earthquake in a humanitarian and very particular context, which is very different to others, also shows what we are doing. But you know, What I'm really concerned about is that we are not discussing this at the highest level of the organization, you know? We are looking at mental health in a very specific framework. We're talking about it when we look at non-communicable diseases, and inside that umbrella, looking it on mental health diseases. But the issue is, it's broader than that, you know? And I think what we are starting to do from the UN Youth Office, and with a strict commitment also to do it in support and in collaboration with young people, it's really about creating this global network, global movement, so we can influence policy at the highest level, you know? Because that's when we recognize something, when we are able to make it visible through the data, through the evidence, that's how we are going to really change it structurally.
So you will further invest in projects like we heard already a nice example of Jim, but I hear you say we also have to take it much on a higher level. Julian, you already mentioned that you're an advisor for the U.S. Surgeon General the advisory, and for the WHO as well. So what would your advice be to build more resilience, to be more mentally healthy?
Yeah, it's a really critical question because we need to have action. And while much of my career has been spent in the scientific realm, that science, if it stays in academia, will never have impact.
That's not enough for you. You really want to
No, we've got to change now, right? And so that's why I am so passionate about working with these organizations, particularly where there is opportunity for real change. And what we see from the evidence is that many of these outcomes are on a continuum. And so, for instance, for every increase, so I'll just give an example within the realm of social connection. With every level of increase in social connection, there's a decrease in risk. And so we see this across other outcomes as well. Why do I mention that? Because most of our efforts are on the extreme low end. Now, of course, those who are most affected clearly need our help. But if those are the only people across the whole spectrum of the population that we are targeting, we are missing a huge realm of possibilities across the population for change. And so what I suggest is that there is opportunities for societal change, population level change, that can not just affect the most extreme end, but the whole risk trajectory and that whole spectrum. And so how do we do that? In part, we can look at protective factors and how do we invest in things that will prevent, to the extent that we can, all of the factors that are controllable, right? And that also means identifying those that are most modifiable. Some things are much easier to modify than others. And so we can start investing in and targeting the kinds of things that are going to impact the biggest change. And of course that also needs to be investment across sectors of society, because we know that government and NGOs, we cannot do this alone. And so we've got to have input from all actors of society in order to help create this change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Maybe I still want to look, so we need all actors of society, but what can we do? Because you did also a lot of research from individual level, no?
Yeah.
Could you tell us a little bit more on that?
So I want to share with you one study that I did that we actually looked at something kind of surprising. It was very simple. We did a multi-country randomized control trial where we simply asked individuals to do small acts of kindness for their neighbors over the course of a month. It really only needed to be like once a week. And people could do literally whatever they wanted, whatever they felt comfortable with. And what was remarkable is what we found was that this led to significant reductions in loneliness, in stress, neighborhood conflict, and even indicators of mental health. Now, why do I highlight this one? The reason I do this is because it doesn't cost anything. It doesn't require trained professionals. Literally anyone can do it. And what I think is also really remarkable is that presumably the people on the receiving end benefited, but we only measured the benefits to the person providing these acts of kindness. And so what this suggests is that one of the best ways to help ourselves is to help others. And so this, I think, is a very powerful way that we can do how these small things can potentially have a ripple effect and have a bigger change more broadly. Now, do I think that this is going to be the thing that's going to solve all of this? No, of course not.
It's the one we have
but
impact
it's one way that we can start, because each little act that we do can start a chain reaction to bigger actions and bigger effects.
So after this session, you can look your neighbor deeply in the eyes and then ask him or her whether he or she needs a hug. And it's already one thing on individual level we could do. Felipe, it's ChangeNOW. It's really an event of hope. What message do you want to give to the audience here?
Maybe before answering directly, just wanted to emphasize one point, I think as Julianne has been very, very clear, and also basing all her arguments and points with evidence, it's very clear that we need to promote mental health as a cross-cutting issue, with a big emphasis of it in relation to education and how really we integrate social emotional learning in our curriculums, because that's really about building resilience and preventing, And we all know that we don't need to smoke to prevent lung cancer, And we know that we need to eat in certain ways to have a more healthy life in other terms, But we still need much more education in relation to what is that we can do to prevent and to take care of our mental health. And also, at the same time, when we are talking about the cross-cutting and the policy, for me it's crucial that when we look at this topic, we do it with a youth-led and rights-centered approach, It's not the traditional way of looking at this matter that will really change structurally the challenges we are facing. In terms of call to action, I think that definitely change starts with all of us, So for me, in this room and in these conferences, there's a lot of people that are change makers, and they are doing a lot for everyone, And I think that one concrete action is, let's also take care of ourselves, Let's give us the time that we need in order to be ready to accomplish our mission, our dreams, and to help others. But this is not a selfish decision. This is really about being more impactful. So maybe that's my call to action, or what I do on my own,
Yeah, take care of yourself, and then we can also take care of each other. I'm afraid that we have to wrap up this part of the session, but we won't do this without giving them a warm round of applause for Felipe, Paullier, and Julianne. Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure.
Nice having you here. You can leave this here. Thank you so much. Julianne Holt-Lunstad. Her last name disappeared in my memory. Sorry for that. I'm so happy to announce the following guest on stage. Even though she's only 31 years old, this climate justice activist campaigns against fossil fuels, crossed the Atlantic on a sailboat, and with her debut book, It's Not Just You, she was shortlisted for the Wainwright Prize. What a powerful lady is coming on stage. Put your hands together for Tori, Tsui. Hello, Tori. So nice to have you here in a super busy schedule. You're quite a climate activist, no? Could you maybe tell us where does it come from, your engagement, your activism?
Yeah, I think like a lot of us, we started caring about the climate from a young age. And I don't think that should be a precursor to taking action for the climate. But in my case, that was my story. I grew up in a small fishing town in the northeast of Hong Kong. And, you know, I spent a lot of time living on the water on my dad's boat and bearing witness to increasing number of typhoons, environmental degradation. Hong Kong, ironically, despite having this very strong image of a cosmopolitan, bustling city, was a city full of biodiversity. Only 25% of the land is developed, but that number kept increasing. And I think seeing that as a child growing up, I felt a very deep sense of injustice, and I primarily focused on conservation efforts. But then I think as I started learning more about the climate crisis and the relationship between the fossil fuel industry, increasing carbon emissions, temperatures going up, that spurred on my climate action and led to where I am today.
Yeah, and there's definitely, so the relationship between your mental health and the climate is very strong, and that's what you write about in your book. It's not just you, it's about eco-anxiety. So maybe just very shortly, what's eco-anxiety?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest issues with the term eco-anxiety is that it has so many different definitions, and that can make it quite difficult to pin down, I suppose, your relationship to climate change, and also create a broader sort of diagnoses and like treatment options for people, if we even want to say that it's something that needs to be treated. Because I argue actually it's a very adaptive response to very unnatural circumstances we're going through. And, you know, there are definitions that range from calling it a chronic fear of environmental doom. The suffix of anxiety implies that people are anxious in response to the climate crisis. But the definition that I like the most is by the Climate Psychology Alliance, which calls it the mental, somatic, and emotional distress in response to dangerous changes in the climate system. And the reason why I like that is because it's broad enough. It talks about not only the mental impacts, but the physical impacts, because I feel like, and this is something I write about in the book, that there's a huge disservice to focusing on this futurity element of climate change. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of emphasis of people's well-being in response to fears of the future. But what that does is it detracts from the environmental defenders and frontline activists who have been experiencing generational trauma at the hands of extractive systems that go hand in hand with the climate crisis. You know, I'm talking about indigenous resistance against the fossil fuel industry. I'm talking about land grabbing. I'm talking about the social injustices that come from being an environmental defender. For instance, Colombia, which is a place that I had the privilege of living for 4 months, is the most dangerous place to be an environmental defender, where people, specifically indigenous people, are routinely murdered for their activism. And does that not fall under the category of mental health in response to climate change? So I feel like there is a danger sometimes with eco-anxiety being very Eurocentric. It's not something that only affects people in Europe, it's a worldwide thing. But the book was designed to make sure that we really unpack the breadth of emotional distress in response to climate change.
And the book you wrote about, you really want to shift away from eco-anxiety. You're suffering fear, and it's your own responsibility.
Absolutely.
You really want to shift away from that, and we need to look at it from a broader perspective.
Right. It often makes me laugh thinking about when I was younger and I had very crippling eco-anxiety. You mentioned that I sailed across the Atlantic, and it's funny because at the time, I was a youth climate activist. I was very eco-anxious, and I had been told that the best thing to do for my eco-anxiety was to take action, to go spend time in nature. And that involved sailing across the Atlantic. And the funny thing is, after I did that, I was still incredibly eco-anxious. I did everything that it said on the tin, like go outside, do this, do that. And I still have eco-anxiety, and the whole point of it is not to get rid of it. I do think that living with it is something we have to make peace with, because it is telling us to essentially be aware of the circumstances that we're in. It's very much, our response to the physical environment around us and the social environment. But the reason why I say that, in the book I write that we need to kind of divest from this individualism, our own fault that we're suffering from eco-anxiety, is because we wouldn't have these experiences if it were not for the big corporations that are literally destroying the planet. And so my rhetoric and my sort of plea to people is to really think about eco-anxiety from this systemic lens of, okay, which industries are destroying the planet, which industries are putting profit before people, which industries are keeping me up, awake at night. And one of those industries is the fossil fuel industry. And so I started seeing campaigning against the fossil fuel industry as mental health care. Now, obviously, that comes with a whole plethora of different struggles, like, burnout, the sort of negative news cycle that you see when you see more and more oil fields being opened up. But in the UK, I work on a campaign called Stop Rosebank. We tried to shut down the Rosebank oil fields in the North Sea, which was being opened by Norwegian state-owned oil giant Equinor. We took them to court in November, and we won our court case in February. That relieved my eco-anxiety quite a lot. And I think, I started reframing it in that sort of systemic change perspective.
They're really, so the root cause is those fossil fuels, the inequality, some people...
Absolutely. I mean, we all have different sort of, biological and social makeups that predispose us to different mental struggles. I'm definitely one of those people that's had my fair share of mental struggles in my life, but the thing is, it's not an equal playing field for sure, but this is only being exacerbated by the industries that are destroying the planet, by the social inequalities that we're witnessing. And I think that, everyone on this earth will have struggles, but it's the rate at which this is proliferating, and it's the extent of it that just isn't natural.
And from what you mentioned, so I had my fair share of mental health problems. How do you get, because eco-anxiety, it works paralyzing, so how do you get past the paralyzing effect of the eco-anxiety?
Yeah, emotional paralysis and even physical, it's very much an attribute of a lot of people, especially young people. I mean, I saw a study that came out earlier in February which said that 4 out of 5 primary school children are extremely terrified about the future. And that's quite a sobering...
4 to 5.
4 out of 5.
Yeah.
So it's quite a sobering statistic. And actually, a lot of young people that I've met struggle with that paralysis. They're kept awake at night. They don't know what to do. And I do think that in those instances, when you're dealing with young people, primary educators have to be aware of the extent to which these issues are affecting young people. And I would almost say that we have to try and not lead with a doomist perspective, because that can be incredibly disabling for a lot of people. I understand the reality of what we're facing, but I do think that there is a really unique and tactical way that we have to start talking about climate change that's both, realistic but empowering. And unfortunately, if you're someone who consumes media, it can be extremely depressing. Now, as someone who works, I guess, full-time in climate, I often get asked, oh, did you read that latest news article? Do you hear about this? And yeah, sure, I'm quite aware of the situation that we're in, that I don't feel the need to overconsume doomist rhetoric. I think that can be very dangerous and actually be a hindrance to me and my capacity to act. And so I guess I'm imploring anyone who resonates with that to not dig yourself a deeper hole than the one we're already in. And I think that entails trying to strike that balance between being mindfully informed in a way that informs your capacity to act.
Mindfully informed, and then the capacity to act. And there again, there's the importance of being in a group, I guess.
Right. I'm very much motivated by solutions and taking action, and it's taken me time to get there. I'm not going to deny that I sometimes have days where I'm like, oh, this is difficult, and I don't have the motivation to keep going. I think being honest about that is really important. I never want to shy away from the heavy emotions, but I do think that, with this Stop Rosebank campaign, we also shut down another oil field called Cambo in the past. We have a proven track record of success, and it's those things that keep reminding me, like, we've won once, we can do it again. And I say this to most people that I campaign with, and even folks outside of the climate movement: the fossil fuel industry will fall. It's a matter of time. It will fall.
Yeah, I see her applauding. I'll give you some time
it will
for that.
fall. And, for anyone who is part of that industry or otherwise who's campaigning against it, it's a matter of time. Renewables are cheaper than they've ever been. The public conscience on the way that the fossil fuel industry has been denying the science and now delaying it through creating a social license by sponsoring institutions and events. Might I also say, like this one, let's call it out, let's be frank, we have to have these tough conversations. That has to end. And societal consciousness is going to be part of that change. We are seeing people who are mobilizing. We're seeing more and more oil fields being shut down. Yes, we have a rising sort of wave of authoritarianism and fascism that we have to contend with. But I really genuinely believe that as much as that is increasing, so is the resistance. And I really have faith that in my lifetime, we will see the end of fossil fuels.
It's nice to hear such a hopeful message.
There's no choice. Like, it's, I say to people who are in corporations, get behind it or get left behind.
How do you take care of your mental health now? So it's being educated and taking action that you already mentioned. Do you have some tips for the audience as well? How can we take really good care of ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I kind of look at it as a spectrum of, like, how do I take care of myself as an individual versus in community. I think community care is foundational to any form of longevity and well-being. I have a very, very beautiful community through the climate space outside of that, and we really believe in sort of like mutual aid and taking care of one another. And it's no surprise that when you see communities that go through natural disasters, those who are in community, who have those strong community networks, are less likely to develop forms of post-traumatic stress disorder. It's studied, it's scientifically proven, but it's also common sense, right? And so I feel like really being tapped into a network of change makers is what holds me accountable as a climate activist, but also holds me during my darkest days. Insofar as an individual, I subject myself to unpleasant things like cold water swimming, and I subject my friends to it too. And it's something that really keeps me grounded. I have a very big love for the ocean. I mentioned I grew up in a small fishing town. I lived on a boat with my father, and also sailing. The ocean connects me to home in so many ways, and it connects me to myself. And actually, one of my good friends describes the ocean as an extension of her, like, where does the human body start and end? For her, that's such a strange concept, to be kind of seen as this soul unit when we're actually part of nature. And I sometimes think about that as well. So I have a very deep relationship with the ocean and with nature.
So go into the wild and get part of a community. And the community is all bottom up, or can we strengthen it? Because we still have a UN General Secretary here. So what would you advise to him?
I mean, every community has the potential to create profound transformation. Whether you want to call it a climate movement, whether you want to call it working in policy, whether you want to call it like your neighborhood or mutual aid. I think it's all relevant, it's all important. We need ground up, top down approaches. And yeah, in the case of something like eco-anxiety, one of the things I really wanted to emphasize in the book was I didn't want to just see it as this environmental sort of issue. And I wanted to really emphasize that it is intrinsically linked to every form of struggle in society. And I think when you have a broad issue like that, it requires broad solutions and broad communities. I write that, like, access to safe housing and medical care and education is also mental health care. I mean, prevention is the best medicine, right? So yeah, I wanted to create a very holistic approach to it, which also includes the way in which we see it as not solely mental, but actually very somatic and physical as well.
A couple of years ago, you said in Vogue, you were interviewed by Vogue, and you said hope is something you have to cultivate. For all the people here, what are you hoping for?
Yeah.
Last words.
Yeah, I think the reason why I said that is because far too often hope is misconstrued as this kind of passive thing, and as we're seeing with, you know, the way things are going politically and also socially, change doesn't happen in a vacuum, and it's not something that's passive. It doesn't just happen, and it's not guaranteed, right? Like once change happens in society, even when it's written in law, things can be reversed. And I think it just goes to show that every struggle is a constant uphill battle and effort. And that's why I really believe that even the likes of hope require us to really cultivate the change that we want to see. Yeah, I mentioned Rosebank in Cambo, which we managed to shut down. That gives me hope, for lack of a better word, but also just knowing that people care. And I want to leave you with this study that was done in the UK, which, you know, contrary to popular belief, there's often this opinion that not every sector of society cares about the climate crisis. We're often, you know, pigeonholed, like, oh, only the environmentalists care. There was this nationwide study that showed that every single community, whether working class, whether people of color, middle class, upper, whatever, every single society, regardless of where they stood on the political spectrum, had to care about the environment. Whether or not they call it climate, that's another entire story. And I think for me, the more that we embrace that caring about the climate is a human given, is part of our humanity, the more we can start building bridges and actually creating structures of change that cross political divides, that also create communities where we tackle this together.
Well, we're often too focused on the differences. We should...
Absolutely. And you know, I've spent a lot of time speaking to people. I'm not specifically part of Just Stop Oil, who many of you might have heard of, but I support a lot of my comrades who organize in that space. But I've been asked by radio interviewers or communities in the streets, like, oh, I don't really like Just Stop Oil, I can't get behind them. But when you actually start speaking to them about what they care about, we have exactly the same wants and desires. And I think it's about recognizing that regardless of what political spectrum or class you come from, we actually all want the same things at the end of the day. People want safety and security for their families and loved ones.
Do we all want the same thing? Let's agree. Raise your hands if you do. Do we
That's
all want the same as Tori? Yeah, Felipe agrees. The rest is still in doubt. Okay, Tori, too, I really want to thank you for this discussion.
Andy.
Please clap, put your hands together for Tori, too. Yeah, with these words, we're at the end of this session, Mental Health Matters. If you're interested in Tori's book, you can buy it in the bookshop here at ChangeNOW. Hopefully you feel better now. You will strengthen the amount of and the quality of your social relationships. You will join a community and undertake action like many other people already do. Thank you so much for attending this session, and I wish you a very pleasant rest of the day. Bye-bye.